welcome to an informational hearing of the Senate Energy, Utilities, and Communications Committee for October 31st, 2011. And happy Halloween. We hope we have a lot more treats for Californians today than tricks for Californians today. As most of you who have followed our committee very closely know, this is a fifth in a series of hearings concerning the allocation and administration of ARRA funding for energy efficiency programs that have been awarded to the state of California. More specifically, this hearing is a direct follow-up to the hearing of August 1st of this year, in which we heard from our state auditor that at that time, barely 20% of Californians' $411 million in ARRA energy efficiency and weatherization funds had been spent at a point of about 2 years after the enactment of the Recovery Act. And with less than a year to go before the 2012 expenditure deadlines, the delays in getting funds out the door in programs administered by both the Energy Commission and the Department of Community Services and Development were literally putting tens of millions of dollars at risk. But even more egregiously, I think we're delaying the creation of jobs that these funds were intended to create. So the purpose of today's hearing is to get another progress report from those two very agencies, the Energy Commission and the Department of Community Services and Development, on how they've been doing, what's changed, we hope for the better, since that hearing a couple of months ago. I do want to take a moment to acknowledge and thank the Commission and the Department for the priority and the diligence they've given it in the last couple of months. I understand we will have better reports and better progress to discuss today. But while September and October updates are encouraging, it's important to acknowledge that some challenges still remain. And we have our work cut out for us. Also, before bringing up our witnesses, I want to acknowledge the legislation that the legislature passed towards the end of session to help California avoid losing the millions of dollars of unspent ARRA funds. In consultation with the Energy Commission and the administration, our committee staff helped draft AB 1392, which was authored by Assemblymember Bradford, which authorizes the Energy Commission to transfer up to $50 million of ARRA funds to a revolving loan fund administered by the Department of General Services for financing energy efficiency retrofits of state buildings. And on the one hand, while I'm happy to report that that law provides a little bit of a safety net for the potential sweep of unspent ARRA dollars to the federal government, in no way should that lessen the urgency for the money being spent, being properly spent, being quickly spent in the way they were initially proposed and designed. I'll afford my colleague here, Senator Berryhill, an opportunity to make some opening remarks if you'd like before calling our first panel. If not, then let's begin by hearing from the Energy Commission, which faces an April 30th deadline, to be specific, for the expenditure of $226 million in ARRA funds for various energy efficiency programs. And they include, by the way, two contractors facing significant risk, as outlined in your report, one being the Sacramento Municipal Utility District and the second being the Local Government Commission. So we'll hear from those representatives as well. If we can call them forward. Mr. Oglesby from the Energy Commission's here. Kate, I'll apologize, is it Mice or Mies? From the Local Government Commission, Rachel Huang from SMUD, and Ted Park from the Department of General Services.
Good morning, Senator. Thank you for having me here today to provide an update on the ARRA SEP programs administered by the Energy Commission. I guess I'd like, and good morning, Senator Berryhill as well. I guess I'd like to start by agreeing with your admonition that the best use of the ARRA funds is to provide immediate stimulus and job opportunities in California, as well as energy efficiency. And the intent of the legislation, which I'll talk about a little bit in my formal presentation, was to provide a safety relief valve, if you will, to ensure, to preserve federal funds use in California in the event that we are unable to fully utilize. Our first goal and priority, however, is to fully utilize those funds to stimulate the economy in the state of California now and as soon as possible. As background, I last appeared at the Senate Energy Committee on August 1st to provide a progress report on the SEP and to address a July 14 Bureau of State Audits report that expressed concern that the program may not be able to fully utilize all federal ARRA dollars by the April 30, 2012 deadline. I took the auditor's assessment as well as the concern expressed by the legislature very seriously. As a result, we have bolstered our oversight and accountability of the state energy program. We engaged the Department of Finance, Office of State Audits, to evaluate recipients' progress. The Office of State Audits responded immediately, and I'm very grateful for their aggressive and immediate response, and conducted on-site examination of the progress and verification of the documentation associated with those grants and awards. The Energy Commission followed up with letters to projects that were identified as at risk of not fully utilizing their funds by the deadline and requested confirmation of the potential shortfall amount or the submission of plans to improve performance. In all, 12 letters were sent. 11 responded positively. The Energy Commission received a communication just late last week from the 12th recipient, a solar panel company, that they will submit an alternative plan the first week of November. No state funds have been paid to that company as of yet. Overall, there is still a large unexpended state energy program fund balance. About 64% of the funds remain in our account. If you count funds transferred to revolving loan accounts like the Department of General Services, that number shrinks to 42%. All $226 million has been encumbered and contracts have been executed with the award recipients. Our task now is to monitor progress, provide assistance, and if necessary, reallocate funds from unsuccessful projects to successful projects. I want to acknowledge and thank the Chair for your leadership in securing an amendment to Assemblymember Bradford's AB 1392, which authorizes the Energy Commission to make last-minute transfers to the Department of General Services. This gives us a tool to protect any unused funds from reverting to the federal government. Our goal is to ensure the full utilization of funds before the April 2012 deadline, but the availability of this tool allows us to let existing award recipients to have more time to use the funds before the Energy Commission otherwise would be forced to intervene. As you have seen from our third monthly report on ARRA progress, a relatively small amount of funds are in queue for reallocation. But admittedly, the amount could grow depending on the performance of a few significant projects. I understand you would like me to provide some information on jobs created under the SEP program. I will do my best. Accurate and complete results will not be available until the projects are complete and the invoices are in. It is also important to keep in mind that the SEP program had dual goals of energy efficiency and economic stimulus. Our best calculations to date for the Clean Energy Business Financing Program, the program made 5 loans totaling approximately $23.5 million that fund solar technology manufacturing equipment for the manufacture of concentrating solar photovoltaic and thin film photovoltaic systems. Project borrowers expect to employ 520 permanent full-time employees and expand California's solar panel manufacturing capability by 113 megawatts, which, when deployed, will produce enough electricity to power 24,000 homes. The Energy Conservation Assistance Act, also called ECA, made 36 loans totaling $25 million to California local government, public schools, and public hospitals for the installation of energy efficiency retrofits and renewable energy projects. Once complete, these projects will save approximately 22 million kilowatts of electricity, 140,000 therms of natural gas, and 9,000 gallons of fuel. Projects are expected to employ, at some point in time, 1,238 individuals, and that's because these are projects that are to install energy efficiency equipment. They're not necessarily full-time job. It's work. It's work to do a job, and the jobs can be installing lighting systems over a few days or an HVAC system over a few days. If you were to multiply that work down to full-time equivalents, it would be 55 full-time equivalent jobs. It also reduced energy utility bills by $2.7 million annually and reduced annual greenhouse gas emissions by 8,500 tons of CO2 equivalents. The Energy Upgrade California and workforce training programs are investing over $130 million statewide to complete energy efficiency retrofits and develop effective infrastructure to retrofit California's existing residential, commercial, and municipal building stock. These programs have trained more than 9,000 unemployed or underemployed workers for the green workforce. Survey information from project contractors confirms more than 900 jobs have been created or retained. More than 1,800 whole-house residential retrofit projects are underway or completed throughout the state, producing an average energy savings of 29%. More than 3,000 commercial retrofit projects are underway or completed, and leverage funds from this program exceeds $337 million, which increases the impact in California's economy. Now, I also want to take a minute about the reallocations, because part of the target here is when we find a low-performing program is to reuse the funds before the expiration date. To date, over $9 million of RSEP funds have been reallocated to other RSEP projects. In addition to ensuring the recipients can expend the funds by the federal deadline, economic stimulus and job creation were key criteria in choosing projects to augment. In addition, the Clean Energy Business Finance Program finances manufacturing equipment for California solar panel manufacturers. Nearly $4 million is in the process of being reallocated to 2 borrowers, augmenting existing successful projects. Funds were reallocated to these manufacturing firms, recognizing their potential for job creation and the local and regional economic stimulus resulting from the expansion of these manufacturing facilities. In closing, the Energy Commission is committed to ensuring all RF projects will be completed by their federal program deadlines and the full range of energy and employment benefits are achieved. I'm happy to respond to your questions.
Thank you very much for your report and again for the progress that has been made. We do want to acknowledge that. I do have a series of questions, but I'd like to hear from all the panelists first.
Okay. Good morning, Senator Padilla, Senator Berryhill. I'm Kate Meese with the Local Government Commission. I'm an associate director there. I'm going to provide you a little bit of background about the program we're overseeing, highlight some successes to date, and then provide some updates on our expenditures to show how we plan to expend our budget fully by the contract close. As a background, the Local Government Commission is a nonprofit organization. We were founded in 1981 to assist local governments on issues related to energy, health, community design, and water. In late October of last year, the CEC awarded us a contract to oversee the statewide Energy Upgrade California program and manage administrative responsibilities. Through our contract, our program team has created a statewide infrastructure to support the larger Energy Upgrade California effort and the investments of local government and utility programs. This infrastructure includes a one-stop web portal where homeowners can get information about utility and local government rebates and locally available financing and find contractors to upgrade their homes. A broadly adopted coordinated brand and message that can be utilized and leveraged by utility and local programs. We have regional teams on the ground throughout the state working with homeowners, contractors, local governments, and other key stakeholders to provide assistance and build awareness about available resources. Workforce development is another key component to ensure that contractors are trained to do the upgrades. And we'll soon have financing programs to augment rebates and encourage uptakes by addressing the barrier of the upfront costs to do upgrades. These key program elements help to consolidate multiple state, utility, and local government energy efficiency programs under one brand to reduce consumer confusion, provide consistency, increase cost effectiveness, and leverage investments. Since the start of our contract in November of 2010 and our public launch in March of 2011, we've already achieved a number of successes. We've achieved a significant number of upgrades, over 1,800 completed or in process, with an average annual energy saving of 29%. We've made significant investments in the contractor community. Our regional teams have assisted over 1,300 contractors in receiving training, with over 377 participating in the program. Through the web portal, over 3,000 homeowners have connected with contractors. And in August, our team launched a subsidized contractor training program and have already trained 144 of the 1,250 contractors that will be trained throughout the end of the contract term. And this is a smaller subset of the 9,000 that Executive Director Oglesby mentioned that are a part of other contracts. We've helped to increase jobs, directly creating or retaining over 90 jobs within the contract team, in addition to the overall jobs that have been created out of the program and related to our work, which exceed 700 since March. We've been successful reaching homeowners and other key stakeholders. We've attracted over 1.2 million web visits, 200,000 unique visits, and averaging just under 1,000 a day. Statewide marketing efforts have resulted in 58 million impressions, over 27,000 stakeholder interactions with property owners, contractors, local government representatives, and our team has earned over 239 media exposures, and that's averaging now about 20 a week. Over the last year, we have laid the foundation of the program, and since the launch in March, we've been continuing to ramp up. We've spent $10.3 million through September, 31% of our budget. And based on expenditures to date and anticipated to come in from our partners through the end of this month, we expect 40% of the budget to be expended and 57% through November, to account for 100% by project close in March. These are big spikes, and they're primarily due to large one-time expenditures to set up the financing programs. We have LA's Debt Service Reserve Fund, which is expected to expend $2.5 million next month. San Francisco Loan Loss Reserve Program, which is expected to spend almost $400,000 next month. The statewide subsidy, which is expected to go into escrow in December, and that will fully expend the $2 million budgeted to that at that time. And Sonoma County will be establishing a revolving line of credit after a November 1st formal amendment that we're waiting on, which accounts for $2 million and will mean significant expenditures in November. Other key areas that are ramping up include the workforce development component. In August, I mentioned the team launched a subsidized contractor training program. In September, they also launched a HERS property owner incentives program, and those together make up $2.5 million of the budget. While we have achieved tremendous successes, I can't say it hasn't been without a number of ongoing challenges. The ramp-up of program implementation took longer than anticipated. Establishing new partnerships has streamlined program delivery for consumers, but it's been complex and time-consuming, and our program has been dependent and influenced by a wide variety of players. Lack of financing. When the program was conceived, there was anticipation of local government PACE programs with dramatic market transformation potential. Many of these programs are on hold pending the FHFA rulemaking. And lastly, of course, the economy. Our program was launched during the most challenging economy the nation has experienced in 70 years. So based on these challenges and the dependence of some of our key program areas on consumer uptake, we've developed a list of contingency plans which were incorporated into a revised scope of work by the Energy Commission at their September 21st business meeting. These areas include the homeowner incentive rebates for energy rating and workforce development. So if uptake is insufficient to meet our contract deadline, those funds can go into other related key program areas. In closing, I want to assure you that our program team will continue to work around the clock to meet our deliverables, to monitor our progress, and to pursue contingency plans as necessary to ensure that all funds are expended and objectives achieved by the end of our contract term. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Wayne.
Good morning, Chairman Padilla, Senator Berryhill. My name is Rachel Wong, and I am the Manager of Customer Program and Operations Planning at the Sacramento Municipal Utility District. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today regarding SMUD's progress in delivering upon its grant from the California Energy Commission through the federally funded State Energy Program. SMUD has a long history in the area of energy efficiency and has continually worked to evolve its programs and help contribute towards California's success in keeping energy intensity growth flat. As part of SMUD's strategy to achieve its AB 2021 goals, moving towards a comprehensive whole building approach to energy efficiency was already planned. With the stimulus funds, the opportunity to help accelerate the market transformation for a whole house approach was an attractive one, enabling SMUD to expand our original launch of a small niche program to a broader audience. SMUD was awarded $19.9 million on February 2, 2010 for its Home Performance Program, also known as HPP, a comprehensive multi-tiered approach which includes single-family and multifamily audits and retrofits, marketing and education, and workforce development and training. SMUD moved forward with its program soon thereafter, launching its website and marketing in July, ahead of the contract signing with the CEC on September 2nd. We couldn't fully launch the program until late March of 2011 because the final provisions for the National Historic Preservation Act and Davis-Bacon Act requirements were delayed. The latest report to the legislature shows that SMUD has spent $1.3 million of the $19.9 million grant as of mid-October, which understandably raises concern. However, this $1.3 million reimbursed by the CEC is only a portion of the $3 million SMUD has invoiced the CEC as of mid-October for work completed through August 2011, and to date SMUD has actually spent $5.2 million on HPP and committed significantly more. Since fully launching in the spring, SMUD has seen a flurry of activity, although the depressed economy and housing market continue to weigh on the single-family program. To date, over 2,000 BPI and HERS 2 assessments have been completed, which have converted into 669 retrofits completed or under construction, totaling about $2 million. Assuming approximately 75 retrofits per month, the single-family program could expect to spend about $3.8 million of the $6.2 million budgeted. The multifamily program saw a significantly higher degree of interest from property owners than originally expected. In HPP's case, low-income property owners who had funding through resyndication found that they could use HPP incentives to add energy efficiency upgrades while already renovating their buildings. To date, for multifamily, over 5,000 units have submitted applications. Of that 5,000, 1,349 have completed assessments and are in the financing permitting bidding phase, which represents $3.4 million. 948 have begun and or completed construction, totaling $2.4 million, and another 891 units have begun assessments or are completed and under review, representing $2.2 million. With this $8 million of projects already in the pipeline with assessments, coupled with the program's continued intake for applications, SMUD expects to be able to spend the $6.6 million budgeted for the multifamily program. In order to address any shortfalls in our program, SMUD has proposed to the CEC including a component to our single-family retrofit program to enable the low-income community to also benefit from comprehensive energy efficiency measures, while providing a lower-risk vehicle for spending grant funding, given there is no cost to the customer. This enhanced weatherization program, currently budgeted at up to $4.9 million, can be used to make up any shortfalls from the market-rate single-family program and the multifamily program, and has been showing promising results to date. Since dropping our direct mail flyer to our highest energy users on our energy assistance program, 407 homes have been audited and $1.4 million of weatherization, refrigerator replacement, attic ceiling and insulation, and HVAC replacement and duct sealing work has been identified. Additional measures taken to mitigate risk include developing a contract amendment with the CEC to allow collapsing of the contract tasks, to provide flexibility in delivering the grant between the single-family, multifamily, and enhanced weatherization program, continuing to feed new projects into the multifamily program pipeline, and working closely with the Sacramento Housing Redevelopment Agency to facilitate completion of their multifamily projects. While SMUD recognizes that there are risks to achieving our grant program goals, we believe that the introduction of the enhanced weatherization program and flexibility to use it to address any shortfalls can deliver upon bringing a broad base of customers comprehensive energy efficiency and deliver upon the $19.9 million grant. Thank you, and at this time I pass.
Thank you. Mr. Park.
Good morning, Senator Padilla and Senator Berryhill. My name is Ted Park, and I am the Deputy Director of DGS's Real Estate Services Division. As I have previously testified before this committee, DGS is authorized by Public Resources Code 25471 to administer the Energy Efficient State Property Revolving Fund for energy projects in state-owned buildings and facilities to achieve greater, longer-term energy efficiency, energy conservation, and energy cost and use avoidance. DGS administers loan agreements with state agencies and departments that, in accordance with ARRA requirements, will preserve and create jobs, promote investments in economically depressed areas, and make investments that have long-term economic benefit. DGS was awarded $25 million out of CEC's ARRA State Energy Program Grant Award of $226 million. The overall benefits to the state include upgraded facility infrastructure resulting in lower long-term energy and maintenance costs, reduced greenhouse gas emissions resulting from lower energy usage, improved indoor air quality and worker comfort, economic stimulus across a wide geographic area, verifiable energy savings documented through measurement and validation, and sustainability of program. As projects are completed and the loans are repaid, program funds are replenished. DGS and its contractors continue to implement energy efficiency projects in 62 state-owned facilities. To date, $15 million, or 60% of the funds, have been dispersed. By next month, we anticipate a total of $18 million, or 72% of the funds, to have been dispersed. All projects are on schedule to be completed by the April 2012 ARRA deadline. Admin costs to date amount to only 1.5% of the program funds. In terms of job creation, using the President's Council of Economic Advisors projection of 10.8 jobs created for every $1 million in construction, we estimate that 271 jobs will have been created from this program. In September 2010, the legislature amended AB 1392, authorizing CEC to transfer up to $50 million in funds to the Energy Efficient State Property Revolving Fund for fiscal years 2011-12 and 2012-13. This is in addition to the $25 million transferred in fiscal year 2009-10. DGS has identified $36.8 million in energy efficiency projects for half a dozen state agencies. Engineering would still be required to develop these projects. In addition, we believe there are outreach opportunities for another 9 departments that maintain a portfolio of state buildings. I'm available to answer any questions you may have.
Great. Thank you all for your reports. I do, as you would imagine, have a series of questions for each of you, so I'll go in the order that you presented, and I'll invite Senator Berryhill to chime in at any point as well. First, for Mr. Oglesby, on behalf of the Commission, what's the criteria that you're using or thinking of utilizing for deciding when and how much funding to reallocate to the DGS fund that we just heard about?
Well, thanks to the legislation, we can put the timing, move the timing back on when to reallocate. And to reallocate, let me first say, absent that bill, we would be doing an assessment of the progress of the programs. And as you can see by the other witnesses' testimony, a lot of work remains to be done. We were confronted with the need to make a near-term projection of how successful the award applicants would be down the road in April, almost now. In order to go through the processes, the administrative processes we would have had to do to retask that fund, to go through a public hearing, reaward the funds, and give enough time for the person who would have received the reallocated funds to complete their projects by April. As a result of having this safety relief valve in the form of the bill that you helped secure, that allows us to wait much later into the process, almost in the last minute. That gives us the luxury of time to let the people and the jurisdictions that have been awarded funds to continue to work to re-engineer the projects and wait until the very last moment before we do what is essentially an administrative transfer of funds. I think it's good to be able to do that because part of the process that followed the Office of State Audits exercise that kind of helped me as the new executive director get hold of where we are on these projects were to work with the recipients to kind of re-engineer. It wasn't so much a fine-tuning as it was more adaptive management. And they came forward with with revised proposals that'll help them work more successfully on the existing awards and hopefully spend down those more successfully.
Okay, so you bought yourself some time, in essence.
Lots of time.
A lot of time.
Measured in months or weeks.
Right. But I just wanted to put these considerations out on the table because when we shift funds from either one contract or one program to another, we're, on the one hand, yes, better insulating ourselves from the funds being swept back by the federal government. But given the dual purpose of the funds from the outset, yes, energy efficiency, but job creation, we can't help but ask the question, well, when we take $1 out of this pot and put it to that pot, are we doing better by way of efficiencies realized or not as well? Are we doing better by way of jobs being created or not as well? So both the criteria and the timing of that is just something that we're being mindful of. I'll also ask you, and DGS is sitting right next to you, how you feel the first $25 million for their loan account has been spent, the type and nature of projects that have been selected, again, from an efficiency as well as a job creation standpoint. I think they've done a pretty good job.
Yeah, I think that the Department of General Services has, in the time that I've had experience with the program, has worked aggressively to move the funds and plan the funds. We've reached across departmental boundaries to consult with them and coordinate with them and make sure that they're making progress. And I would leave it to the Department of General Services to fill in the detail on.
Well, and I'll come back with some specific questions, but if your sense is they've done a good job with the first $25 million, how knowledgeable are you on the additional projects that have been identified for potential investment? We heard a figure of $36.8 million, not quite 50, but certainly more opportunities out there, I'm sure.
We've consulted with the Department of General Services. We've got a feel. They've sent me information on at least their first tranche of around, I think it was $12 million of projects that looked like they would be ripe for immediate transfer if we were to use that avenue.
If I may add, Senator, that first $12 million were projects that were left over from the last allocation of $25 million. We knew there were more projects than we had money for. So that is what the $12.5 million that Rob is speaking to. Since then, we've also identified other departments, quite a few other departments, and we estimate it to be about $36.8 million, almost $37 million. We have another 9 state departments that we could certainly outreach to that have owns substantial parcels and state structures like Parks and Rec, Food and Ag, Fish and Game, Caltrans, Cal Fire, Veterans Affairs, and Water Resources that haven't taken advantage of the program yet, but certainly would if funding was available.
And so, play devil's advocate here a little bit. We know how the programs and contractors have been performing with other efforts. If DGS is doing such a great job, why not go ahead and move the money over now from, again, not just expenditure standpoint, but efficiencies gained and jobs being created?
I think there was, at the outset, an attempt to use the ARRA funds for a variety of purposes, and some of those were residential retrofits and upgrades. Some were to help job training in various local communities. I think the diversity of project type and localities was the approach that was the design of the program at the outset. So I'd have to say that in doing that, you would forego some of those benefits if we were to put it into strictly state facilities, although clearly there's a benefit in energy efficiency, both in installation and saving money through energy efficiency at the state facility. But at the outset, the policy choices were to spread the money throughout the state, accomplish several goals related to employment, local economic stimulus, and energy efficiency.
And I get that obviously there's a balancing act here, but for the purpose of having a public and transparent conversation, I wanted to ask those questions. One specific sort of administrative question. I read in some of the materials that there was a delay in some cases due to payroll certification hiccups. Is that still the case, or has that been resolved with some of the contractors?
I get reports on this, and I understand that there's still some hiccups. At this time, it's the Davis-Bacon requirements, and part of it is learning curve, part of it is invoicing, and part of it is making sure people understand the rules.
How significant are those delays?
How significant?
How worried should I be?
These are resolvable problems within the time frame that we have left.
Okay, but typically they're accounting for a week, couple of weeks, a month, couple of months?
I'll have to give you. I'd rather than respond off the cuff, I'll get back to you with more detailed information on what the performance has been. It relates to different jurisdictions, and the experience in different jurisdictions is different. So let me follow up with you if I can.
Let's move on from DGS. Talk about the Local Government Commission for a little bit. So I'll address some questions at both of you. The contract budget targets $11.6 million for loans and other financing of actual retrofits. I heard a lot in your presentation about spending in the areas of planning, web portal design, outreach, tracking, and quality assurance, but not actual retrofit work itself. Can you just, both of you, maybe expand a little bit upon that? This, by the way, is in the context of a $33 million contract, so $11 million is a full third of the $33 million. At what point do we actually see the work itself being, the upgrades work being done?
So that money has gone into laying a foundation to creating a web portal where all that information about utility and local government rebates lives, so that folks have a place to go to find out about the available resources. It takes a significant investment just to build awareness about the resources that are out there. I mean, you can have great rebates, but if nobody knows about them, then they're probably not going to take advantage of them. So that was the initial push, to lay the foundation and to build awareness about the resources that were available. And now we can build onto it with financing programs. And as I discussed in my presentation, those will be coming on board quickly in November and December.
So of the $33 million, how much has been expended?
10.3.
10.3. And any of that 10.3?
That's through September.
Through September. Any of that 10.3 to finance any upgrades, or has it all been exclusively what you outlined, the planning, the web piece, the marketing, etc.?
It's been for laying that foundation, and the actual direct rebate money will be coming in November and December.
It won't start until tomorrow or very soon thereafter. And do you have a queue of customers ready for retrofits as soon as the financing does become available?
We do have reason to believe that there's a tremendous amount of interest.
Do you know how many customers or how much
I know
money that would roughly add up to?
That, for example, in LA, there are 44 projects in the pipeline, and those are commercial projects, so those would be big energy savers and big projects as well. We know, based on the number of people on the web portal that have contacted contractors and developed action plans, that there's a tremendous interest as well. So I believe once the financing programs come on that address that upfront cost barrier, that there'll be a large uptake.
Okay. Of the money that would be available for financing, and this is just sort of making sure we're dotting the I's, crossing the T's with the federal government, as far as they're concerned, at what point is it encumbered? When the money goes out, the financing is out the door for a specific project, or just when you say, well, we're going to use this money for financing and it's a revolving loan fund or whatever else?
When it goes into escrow, it's considered expended.
Okay. And so you have a proposal to add $5 million more to be considered spent if there's substantial demand. At what point will we be able to say yes versus no? When do we actually start tracking, well, here's requests, here's what the projects look like, and how much money is associated with each project, and that level of information?
We will be monitoring that ongoing, but the CEC has provided the flexibility to add that additional $5 million. I believe that would be a decision made in early March.
And when you not just receive requests or inquiries, but get to the point of deciding, which projects to finance or approve, whatever the terminology is, how are you incorporating job creation considerations other than just, here's a big dollar figure, let's move money out the door?
Because one of the largest barriers is upfront costs to do upgrades. Financing will be a key element to making sure that there's increased uptakes, and increased uptakes means increased jobs.
But I would imagine there's a variety of types of jobs that can be applying for funding. So how do you pick one versus the other when there's undoubtedly going to be a variable in terms of, well, for this amount of money, 10 jobs, for a comparable amount of money, 30 jobs.
In terms of who's applying for the financing?
And how you're deciding who to finance. Let me go out on a limb here. Let me hope that there's going to be more demand than there is funding. So if not, then we have other issues in terms of reallocation. If that is the case, how do you decide who to finance and who not?
So I'll take the case of the statewide subsidy fund, which is where that additional $5 million could go into if there's demand. That is, local governments who have financing programs would be eligible to apply for that funding. So we would look at a number of criteria, job creating benefits, in addition to the demand that they've seen in their programs to date and the confidence we have that they will be able to get that money out.
Again, I want to recognize the dual role for these funds: energy efficiencies to be achieved and job creation. So the job creation piece, I'm looking at more than 12% unemployment, millions of Californians out of work. Is it a formal consideration of jobs to be created, or a vague informal, well, we know there's some jobs that are going to come along with $500,000, $1 million, $2 million financing? So I'm looking for specifics here on how that job creation piece is considered in determining the projects that are to be financed. And given that we haven't put money out the door yet for financing under this specific contract, we still have an opportunity to be ahead of the curve. So one last time I'll ask that question.
So we're waiting on the formal amendment, which we expect to happen tomorrow, and then the exact criteria will be established at that time. So I will take that into
Mr. Chairman,
for the criteria.
Senator Berryhill.
On that line of thought, if there is more demand, I mean, all these states have to be having the same problems with getting this stuff together and qualifying. What happens if we default on this? Where does that money go? Where does it go back to? We've got $33 million. Let's say we don't qualify. What happens to that money?
Should I mention that? At that point in time, we would have to recapture the money and reallocate it to more successful projects. And as a fail-safe, we have the opportunity to divert it to the Department of General Service, which can be done late in the process for state retrofit and energy efficiency improvements in state facilities.
So it would continue in the energy field, though.
We continue in the energy field. We continue to make jobs and energy efficiency out from those funds. Our goal would be to keep the benefit of those funds into California.
So if there was more demand, as the chairman was mentioning, is there any chance that there would be other monies out there available from other states if they don't qualify, or will you will find spots for that money? I take it.
Well, money to California from other states, I don't think it's going to flow in that direction. States that fail to fully utilize their funds, the money reverts to the Department of Energy, and from that point,
it goes wherever.
But we're going to make sure our level best that we utilize all the funds that are allocated to California, that they're allocated in a way that benefits California's energy efficiency, that it benefits our employment, and that we build some industries that will provide continuing employment.
Better our black hole than theirs, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, let me I guess a couple more questions for you, and suggestions by way of these questions. The bad news is that we're sitting here having this hearing with literally only a handful of months to go before the deadlines to spend the money or lose the money. And we have the Local Government Commission here for the reasons that we outlined at the beginning. The good news is, because you're a little bit later than other programs, other contract directors' experiences that we've had, to what extent have you assessed those other experiences, either with people like SMUD, with the Energy Commission, with GSD, with anybody else, to learn what worked for them, what didn't work for them, how to avoid some pitfalls and not repeat some mistakes versus do it a little bit better?
So as the contract administrator, we really look to working with CEC to make any adjustments to our contract term. So I know that they've been looking at a number of the other programs that they're overseeing, and I know that has probably had a big influence on adjustments that we've made to date.
Are there any specific lessons learned or best practices or that we can point to today? Okay, that's fine, but consider that a suggestion then in this time period here before us. Maybe a question for all of you, but primarily the Energy Commission. The legislature will reconvene in January, and while there will only be a few months before the April 30th expenditure deadline, it's still a couple of months before the expenditure deadline. At this point, would you anticipate any urgency legislation needed to help make sure we protect the funds that have been awarded to California?
I'm not aware of any further need for statute. I think that the legislation that you passed at the end of this year gave us the measure of comfort we need to make sure we have a tool available to reassign funds. And
that legislation spoke specifically up to a $50 million figure.
Correct.
So would we have any reason to think right now that we might need more than 50?
No. I'm pretty comfortable. As I said during my testimony, it looks like we have a relatively modest amount, significant but modest amount, that will be up for reallocation, and we can take care of that right now. We have a number of projects that we're actively monitoring. That's the name of the game right now, is to make sure the work proceeds. Many of these projects involve consumer uptake in a difficult economy. We've renegotiated with the many of the project awardees to make sure that they had more flexibility in how they administer the funds in an effort to get them out. And as I mentioned, at the end of the day, we have the bill that you took a great part in to make sure that we could transfer funds up to the last minute so that we can at least retain the benefit in California.
Okay. Two final points on the local government commission. So the money has been going, and I understand the planning, the infrastructure behind the Energy Upgrade California is important. Can you speak to the sustainability of Energy Upgrade California post ARRA dollars?
So I think we all feel very strongly about making sure that the investments to date, both financially and in the jobs created, continue on past the contract term. Part of our contract is to do a sustainability plan, and that sustainability plan will include a number of different options for the Energy Commission to take under consideration for moving forward. But the goal would be to make sure that the momentum that was created in the marketplace continues moving forward.
Well, so a plan will be in place. Let me be more specific and blunt here. Will there be funding in place for Energy Upgrade California to continue post ARRA dollars? If not, what are the ideas, options, the plan for actual funding and financing?
Perhaps I should respond to that. I think many of the funds that are revolving loan funds could have the potential to continue as a revolving loan fund as they're repaid, but the Energy Commission is speaking with the Public Utilities Commission to explore ways to continue the program right now. So it's a work in progress.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you mentioned the Public Utilities Commission, because that was my other nearly final point on the Energy Upgrade California. In a previous hearing of this committee, we heard a wonderful presentation from the Energy Commission about Energy Upgrade California and their web portal and consolidating a lot of information, making it user-friendly, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It was in that same hearing that we heard a wonderful presentation from the PUC about a web portal they had with a lot of the same information. So here we are months later, millions of dollars invested later. How are these two sites or programs being integrated, being consolidated, being streamlined if our intent here is to be centralized and user-friendly? And how is that reflected in your plan?
So we have been working with the Public Utilities Commission. They sit on a steering committee made up of ourselves, nonprofits, the utilities, and a number of local governments, a number of other players. So they've been involved. The Engage 360 web portal is where we get a lot of the data that makes up Energy Upgrade California. So there has been connections from the beginning, similar branding. And so I think there is an opportunity. There's a ruling out right now from Commissioner Farron to look at putting that money potentially into Energy Upgrade California.
So there's still two sites as opposed to having merged them into one?
It's my understanding the Energy 360 is being discontinued in favor of Energy Upgrade California, so there'll be a single point of contact on these programs.
Okay, good. That's what I wanted to hear. Questions for SMUD. So you presented a Plan B here.
Yes.
Given the realities of funding that was moving and what funding that wasn't moving. I wish you the best with Plan B. But given the experience, I have to ask: is there a Plan C in case Plan B doesn't work?
Well, one thing we did, just to elaborate a little bit on Plan B, to ensure it was really providing the mitigation for the risk that we identified is, as mentioned, when we did a hard look and said, what realistically are we seeing in the single-family market? What are we seeing in the multifamily market? We had identified about $3 million at risk. And what we did in working with the Energy Commission is actually our Plan B is up to 4.9, so up to $5 million. So first of all, I guess our Plan B was done to a little overcompensate what we had identified as risk, just in case we had more potential deficiencies other than just the $3 million we had identified in single family. As mentioned, our Plan B, we've actually started doing the recruiting. We've done direct mail. We've done audits. We're actually going to the Energy Commission's business meeting on the 2nd to get approval for the program and the flexibility piece. But as mentioned, we have been seeing $1.4 million in basically less than a month. And so we already have worked with the CEC on our mirror contracts, and at a rate of about $1 million a month, even with, if you assume that you've got 4 months left or 5 months left, we can very easily be able to spend that money. Our Plan C, as we mentioned, are things that we're actually already doing too, is the flexibility piece is also an opportunity for us. Single family has really been the one that we've been concerned about. However, the projection of the shortfall of $3 million, it really assumes that we only get 1,000 single-family units complete. We're at 669 now. We've got 5 months left to go. We've been seeing in the summertime about 80 to 110 retrofits per month. We've conservatively estimated that at 75 per month moving forward. So we're trying to take a realistic look at the numbers and really say, what do we think that we can do versus being too optimistic about it. The other thing is we do have other projects in the pipeline that we haven't mentioned. Out of that 1,000, there's actually the Arbors neighborhood, which has 534 single-family homes. The property owner actually wanted to do it originally as a multifamily, but because it's single-family homes and there's some duplexes in there, we actually suggested transitioning it to a single-family neighborhood approach. That 534 is actually in addition to the 1,000 that we're forecasting for the end of the grant. So we have projects in the pipeline that we feel that we're taking a really realistic look at what we think that the estimates will be, and by having the enhanced weatherization program cover more than the shortfall we had originally projected, we believe that we should be able to successfully spend the $19.9 million.
Okay. And don't get me wrong, that sounds very good. It sounds very, very encouraging, but I still have to ask the next question, which is there a drop-dead date on saying, well, we thought it was going to work out, and it just hasn't, and so therefore we're back in talks with the Energy Commission on having this money move out of SMUD coffers to other programs or other contractors?
For us, I think the timeline is really by December, the end of December, we should have a really good view. We should see if whether or not whether the activity in the summertime for single family drops off or maintains about a 75 single family retrofits per month. The other thing that we'll be watching out for from a multifamily standpoint is we have a number of units that are through the Sacramento Housing Redevelopment Agency, and we know from a funding standpoint those decisions will be coming up at the end of the year, so I think that will give us some indication as well. However, the other thing that we did with our contingency plan with enhanced weatherization is actually front-end loaded and try to spend the 4.9 by January or February, so that we should spend at least $3 million by the end of the year, and so we should be able to see if that is being successful. As mentioned, the phones are ringing off the hook, and we're scheduling quite a bit of work, so we expect that should be showing the progress that we expect. But I think we should know with pretty good certainty by mid to end of December of where we stand in terms of being able to achieve our goals.
Okay, and can you share with us again what the those jobs numbers are?
Sure.
Phone's ringing off the hook. You cited the number of homes, number of structures, number of sort of audits and projects, but how many people are working as a result?
So I know that there's a federal formula. I think the number that we have through the job study is 161. However, I wanted to mention SMUD actually trained building science professionals pre-grant, so those weren't actually counted in the numbers, but pre-grant 54 Sacramento building science professionals completed BPI, BA training, and 17 contractors were certified at the time of program launch. Currently, we have 45 participating contractors within SMUD's home performance program and 22 HERS 2 raters. Los Rios Community College District has trained 44 students to date, and 23 of those were hired and placed in jobs. Build It Green has trained 94 contractors since the start of the program. And then we actually took a look at not only the job study that we shared with the CEC that got us with 161 jobs number, but we actually looked at, we have a number of people at SMUD that are working on the grant that aren't part of the approved list and aren't part of the leverage list, myself included. And with those numbers, we're actually seeing about 285 people currently working on HPP.
Good. So it seems like you're doing well, including this sort of shift of strategy, but from a program design standpoint to workforce training standpoint to actual implementation and et cetera. Given this new focus, I'm wondering if there's any overlap or duplication with the low-income weatherization programs that we'll hear about, not by the Energy Commission, but the Department of Community Services and Development. So how do you reconcile those two very, 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 very similar efforts?
Yes. So SMUD normally has a weatherization program, and it's only we only service probably about 300 to 400 homes within our service territory every year, and it's traditionally oversubscribed. We also understand that there are state and federal efforts with regards to weatherization. We're calling ours an enhanced weatherization. We actually worked with the CEC to identify how we could do beyond just the basic weatherization to make it a little bit closer to the comprehensive energy efficiency measures. Therefore, our traditional weatherization includes weatherization measures and refrigerator replacement, but doesn't include things like attic sealing, the HVAC replacement and duct sealing, which is often more costly from a weatherization standpoint. We are actually screening out, we're doing a couple of things. We're targeting our customers that are on our low-income programs that have the highest energy use so that these customers will benefit more. We're specifically screening out customers that are currently participating in any weatherization programs or have their facilities weatherized in the last 10 years. When the auditors go out to actually do the check, they're actually checking again to make sure that we are not duplicating efforts with regards to weatherization. So we're putting safeguards in place. We're replacing HVAC for systems that are 15 years or older, although the auditors are finding that there's actually quite a bit of HVAC units out there that are 20 years or older. So we're actually replacing systems that are quite old and quite inefficient. And then the attic sealing or the attic insulation and the duct sealing are measures too that we're looking to do that are beyond our normal weatherization. So we're trying to make sure that the populations that we're targeting are not already have not already gone through weatherization or will be doing weatherization, so we're not duplicating efforts, and we're making sure that we're doing beyond what our basic weatherization program is.
Okay. Any other lessons you would care to share on how to coordinate versus duplicate, not just on the homes and families that may be participating or benefiting, but even where's the pool of people that you're looking to train coming from, or hire coming from, or contractors that you're using?
So we actually already had some contractors in place with regards to our weatherization contracts. However, we did have to make sure that the flow down provisions were included, as well as we're actually getting additional, I guess, our contract limits for our HVAC expanded, given that the size of this program is addressing a lot more consumers than we had originally had. So we have been doing that to ensure that we've got the base to do the work. And I think the other thing we do is we work very closely with CRP and other agencies from a weatherization standpoint, so we can ensure that we all have enough of workers to be able to do the work.
Okay. And the appropriate safeguards are in place to make sure a contractor doesn't get paid twice for the same work on the same home, et cetera. Okay. Thank you for that. General services, anything else that's come to mind that you want to share or emphasize?
No, nothing, Senator. Thank you.
So you got plenty of work to do, but you'd welcome the opportunity to do more, is what I hear.
Absolutely.
A couple of other questions for the Energy Commission before I thank you all. One is, any word back from the Department of Energy at the last hearing? You know, one of the leads to the presentation was, but we've applied for a one-year extension from the feds. Have we heard back? Have we not heard back? Just I'm not operating under the assumption that we will get the extension, but
The Energy Commission had not applied for an extension to the feds. It was for your next panel.
Okay.
But let me respond to that. We are not interested in getting an extension. We are interested in completing the use of the funds in California. And as I mentioned, I think we will not be needing an extension because of the flexibility we now have.
Then the last point is, at the risk of getting into the weeds, but sometimes I really, really love it. There's a Butte Glen Community College District project where the contractor, upon the state's review, had payrolls that found the contractor underpaid its workers. And the appropriate work was going to make sure that the workers that did the job were paid fully. Has that been fully resolved at this point?
Let me see if I have the memory in the room, a status in the room that can respond to that. Yeah. I'm afraid, Senator, that, and if that's your last question, it's a bad one to end on, but we'll have to get back to you with that as well.
Well, here's an option. Let me ask for your indulgence during our second panel, if you can make a few phone calls and try to find
Be happy to do that,
question
Senator.
out. It was the only one that was really sort of a red flag on that issue, but it's not insignificant.
It's not insignificant.
We talk about economic stimulus, putting people back to work. You know, it can be pretty demoralizing when here comes a job you've been waiting for 12 months. You go to work and all of a sudden they're stiffing you on your paycheck.
We'll have an answer before the hearing's
I would
over.
imagine it's been resolved by now, but I want to get a little bit more information on that contractor, make sure it's not a systemic issue with that contractor or the community college district, or anywhere in between. So, again, I know we have still some work cut out over the next several months, but I want to acknowledge that we've come a long way in the last few months. So thank you all for your collective work, and look forward to staying in touch. Okay. We will now transition to the second panel. We want to hear from the Department of Community Services and Development, who faces a March 31st deadline for expenditure of their $185 million for weatherization services to low-income residents. And I guess they can anticipate the first question is, have we heard back from the Department of Energy on that extension? But after your presentation and update, I will have a series of questions as well. Okay.
Chairman Padilla, thank you for the opportunity to be here again to give you an update on our Department of Energy weatherization efforts. My name is John Wagner, and I'm the Director of the California Department of Community Services and Development. I'm joined by Jason Wimbley, who oversees all of our energy programs for CSD, including weatherization. And as you know, CSD administers this program in partnership with our 38 local energy service providers located across the state who are responsible for administering the weatherization services locally in everything from outreach and assessment to the actual construction and inspections. As you know, California at CSD was awarded $185 million in ARRA funding from the U.S. Department of Energy to weatherize low-income homes, helping to decrease these households' energy burdens. This total is comprised of two really critical parts. The first part supports the administration of the program through state operations, including oversight, monitoring, reporting. We heard a bit about Davis-Bacon, reporting on prevailing wages, in-field monitoring, and quality assurance inspections. These funds also support training and technical assistance. The second pool of funding is $157.2 million for local assistance production, and these are the funds which are distributed across our network of nonprofit and public community-based energy service providers. It is this portion of the funding that funds all of the local efforts, everything from supplies to salaries, and it's used to weatherize low-income households across the state. CSD has executed contracts with these providers obligating all $157 million. At your last hearing on August 1st, the Bureau of State Audits, BSA, had just issued a letter in July on the state's implementation of the ARRA weatherization program. And as I mentioned back then, having just arrived at the department this past June, I found the BSA analysis to be extremely useful in highlighting some of the challenges that the department was facing in administering this new program. Though federal grants were first beginning to be awarded in March of 2009, the program contained many new federal requirements that were not part of our regular DOE weatherization program. And the Department of Energy's own Inspector General highlighted some of these federal problems that were causing states late startup in their own programs in upwards of the first year due to the delay in federal guidance. The same report also acknowledged that over the course of the first year, only 8% of states across the country had spent 8% of their total award. As an aside, if you look at the current expenditure levels that we're now facing across our 38 providers, if we had in fact received this guidance and at the same time we had received the grants, we would already be out of ARRA funding for California, for CSD. In addition to BSA's highlighting the implementation issues, their analysis was also very helpful to us in constructing a methodology for estimating what we could potentially spend through the remaining months of ARRA based on the amount of time left. Back then, BSA found California at risk of not spending $37 million in federal ARRA funding. So what has happened since then, since that last hearing? First, I want to share an update on the expenditures, which are reflective of our most recent efforts. Production through September shows $102.6 million of the $157.2 million, or 65%, has been spent. And based on the current rate of performance, our most recent analysis shows the $37 million highlighted by BSA as potentially being unspent has fallen to an estimated $21 million. Additionally, California is on track to achieve and likely even exceed our production goals, meaning the number of units or homes that have been weatherized, with nearly 37 units reported completing at the end of September. Furthermore, further data shows that September has an average unit cost that has increased to just over $3,400 per unit. So I think the good news is that these trends are moving in the right direction in terms of increased production, increased expenditures, but we have 5 more months to go, and a number of key initiatives in the work that we are cautiously optimistic will continue to drive down the amount of unexpended ARRA funding. Over the past few months, CSD has undertaken a 3-pronged approach in an effort to maximize weatherization production and expenditures during the remaining months of ARRA. The 3 prongs are: first, enhanced program monitoring and reporting; Second, working with underperforming providers, including encouraging the return of at-risk funds from their contracts to CSD for reallocation. And third, proactively working with the Department of Energy and our local providers to implement programmatic changes to the degree we can and federal rules allow that will enable the local providers to increase their production. The first component I mentioned was to enhance local program monitoring, and we found the BSA analysis so useful that we decided to continue the projections and apply them down to the local energy providers. For the first time in August, CSD began creating a statewide reporter dashboard on all providers' performance, and we have shared this information not only with the providers directly, but with the committee and on a monthly basis since its implementation, and have made this information publicly available on our website. The dashboard has given us a tool to enhance our monitoring of provider performance, measured by their actual units produced or weatherized and their actual expenditures. It has also allowed the providers the ability to see how they are doing in comparison to others. In September, we went further in this analysis, highlighting those providers with contract balances of $1 million or more and who had to increase their production over the remaining months of ARRA by over 50% to successfully meet the terms of their contract. Though we continue to work with all providers, given the fact that our own resources are stretched thin in managing this program, this was a way for us to identify those providers at the greatest risk in which we could focus additional individualized attention. This analysis led to the identification of 7 high-risk providers, which we continue to monitor on a heightened basis. And we have summaries of those providers, of the plans of those providers, if the committee would like. This brings me to the second strategy we've implemented, which was to provide all of our providers an opportunity to return to CSD any funding identified by the providers as at risk of not being spent, so we could reallocate. This process is easier said than done, given all the federal caps on various subcategories of providers' expenditures for items like administration or health and safety and other measures. But by the end of August and effective in September, we successfully reallocated $4.3 million across our network, with 5 entities seeding funding and 10 providers taking on these additional resources. This $4.3 million accounted for just under 8% of our remaining unexpended local assistance in weatherization funding. And the third area in which I'd focus our attempt is to resolve state or federal barriers to our providers' ability to enhance production. Though many of these areas are beyond our control as spelled out in federal statute or regulation, CSD has successfully advocated for, and the U.S. Department of Energy has worked very well with us in approving several important changes that are having a positive impact on our efforts. Some of these larger and more significant victories in this area include CSD's successful efforts in advocating for the ability for local providers to apply something called a blended utility rate when conducting the weatherization efficiency audits, which in most cases results in more measures qualifying for unit installation. The application of the blended rate is helping to increase unit average costs and is particularly helpful for providers that are weatherizing multi-unit dwellings, otherwise known as MUDs. Additionally, CSD was successful in advocating for the weatherization of single units within these multi-family dwellings, where circumstances exist that prevent the weatherization of the whole building. This will help increase the number of units weatherized as they now qualify for weatherization under our program. As well as through working closely with our local providers, we've been able to elevate concerns with the length of time it was taking for the federally required historical review of weatherization projects and have been able to negotiate a more streamlined approach with the State Historic Preservation Office. The recent efficiencies gained in the historical reviews of weatherization projects now allow projects to advance to construction more quickly. Another area that has benefited production, in particular in the area of weatherizing MUDs, has been the Department's efforts to identify a pool of qualified auditors that can perform the large energy efficiency MUD audits, as I mentioned at our last hearing, and this provided a pre-approved list of auditors. So what impact has all of this had in California's performance as measured by production or expenditures? First, as I mentioned, some of the federal changes that CSD has prevailed on will significantly enhance the opportunities for providers that are focusing on MUDs. Historically, due to very low DOE annual funding levels, California has done very little work in the whole building approach of weatherizing MUDs. DOE ARRA provided a new, albeit unexplored, area in which to focus our efforts. And several of the providers of our larger contracts are either in the process of or beginning to work on some large-scale production of MUDs, especially in areas like Los Angeles, Oakland, San Francisco, and Sacramento. Though this area continues to be challenging, these providers are indicating that the next 5 months will witness significant production and expenditure growth in this area, and none of this is yet to be captured in the dashboard report that I mentioned because it is still in the pipeline. And even though providers were given an opportunity in August to give back dollars they didn't think they could spend under the contracts, we are also working and continue to work with a select number of providers on a second reallocation, though admittedly as time goes on, it becomes increasingly difficult to find other providers who can take on additional resources in the waning months of ARRA. However, we expect we may be able to reallocate up to $3 or $4 million in funding should we be able to find providers to take on these resources, and we're in the process of surveying our network, and we believe we have identified some providers to do so. In the most recent department analysis of local providers' production, there will likely be a disparity in the production capacity of some service providers, especially as we get closer to the end of the local providers, as we get closer to the end, and local providers will start winding down services to begin their grant closeout. This has made us look at flexible opportunities and innovative solutions to supplement this reallocation effort. One of those efforts we are working with all of the Los Angeles area providers on and looking at possible opportunities is assisting in the underperforming agencies to fully expend their dollars. We've committed to attempting to keep resources in the area and are working with them to develop workable solutions for the Los Angeles area. However, we are also committed to, as urged by the Department of Energy, to take a more global approach as needed. Another solution we're exploring is something we're calling the Weatherization Strike Force, which will help focus limited resources and time on some specific areas of the state, which this strike force can enhance production. Through working with a provider in Northern California, the strategy will make crews available in certain areas of the state where work and resources are available. But we are still working on some of the details of this option. But the goal is really to increase weatherization opportunities and to fill gaps in production wherever possible. The strike force will also help maintain productive capacity in some of the local providers as some of the local providers begin to ramp down in the final months of ARRA. So as you can see, much has been done, real progress has been made, but additional barriers and challenges remain. Though we've driven down the BSA's last estimate of at-risk funds by nearly half, we're hopeful we will continue to go down even further. But our success will continue to be determined by our providers' production and expenditures levels, which admittedly contain some degree of uncertainty. Having said that, CSD continues to commit to work with our federal, state, and all of our local energy service providers to ensure we maximize every available resource in California during the remaining months of ARRA. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you. Anything to add?
No.
All right. Handful of questions then. First of all, I think you've done a great job of sort of really monitoring in much more detail here to the contractor by contractor level to see, who's in trouble and catching those warning signs earlier than this committee heard in the past. So then you can identify not just, which contracts or contractors aren't performing, but how much they're projecting to underspend by and how much money that can free up and we can reallocate, et cetera. What's the process or criteria you're using to identify who may be capable of taking on more of the work as you're making those reallocation, redistribution decisions?
I'll ask Jason to step in and fill in anything I missed, but over the course of the last couple of weeks, and this continues, we've surveyed all 38 of our providers, and we look at the criteria that we would look at include their contract expenditures to date, the degree to which they're on target to meet their goals of their original contract amount, the remaining months of ARRA, and for those who are in a position to of being kind of near the end of achieving those goals or even exceeding their goals should their rate continue. I think those would be the ones that would be very ripe for continued investment. But part of the survey and reaching out to all of them is to have the discussion with each provider and to have a dialogue about what potentially they could take on in additional resources and additional program funding. So it is both the analysis that the state has done on their current achievement, but also the providers being able to willingly acknowledge they can take on more during the remaining months of ARRA.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so there's both pieces. I just want to make sure that we're not just taking their word for it, because anytime you want to conduct a survey saying, hey, when we have more funding available for you, are you ready for it?
Right.
You know, who's not going to say yes to that? Also understand that there's ARRA aside, regular weatherization service providers that we've had historically, some which chose not to participate with ARRA funds because of some of the additional reporting requirements and other requirements that came along with that. Is that a potential pool of people to look to, you know, now that the rules of how the specific pot of ARRA funds is to be spent is clear, as opposed to anticipating those rules at the federal level?
Yes.
And if so, how we've utilized that pool of folks?
Yes, there are a couple of providers that we are currently evaluating. They continue to administer the annual LIHEAP and DOE weatherization funds that come to the state. And one of those providers happens to be located in the LA area, where we're actively negotiating the opportunity for them to be part of our reallocation plan to where they can preserve some of the funds that may come available to keep it within the LA County area.
Okay. And so again, you have this spreadsheet with some folks in bold, sort of red flags, if you will, on these are the ones that we're most concerned about. I think the Department of Finance identified 7, depending on percentages of unspent balances. I looked at least 10 myself. But in aggregate, what's the game plan? Obviously, you want to ideally have every contract performed. To the extent that it's not, you have an opportunity to redirect some of those funds. So is there a different drop-dead date for each contract? Is there a drop-dead date for you guys overall in the next couple of months? What's the plan for making these shifts?
So I think what you're referring to is what we call our dashboard, and you're right, there are 7 providers that have been highlighted. And what the department has done, we have not utilized the Department of Finance. The department did our own analysis of these departments' plans and what they have been able to do as far as meeting the goals as outlined in their contract. And each one of these providers is highlighted because they were identified or defined as having over $1 million as of the August dashboard report and needing to increase their capacity by 50% or more in order to meet their contract goals. And so that triggered the highlighting of these providers. And I should say, Mr. Chairman, that each of these is unique in some of the issues that they're dealing with and how they plan to expend the remaining dollars of their contracts. But the game plan is and we have secured from each of those at-risk providers their plans, what they are intending to do in the months ahead to meet the full terms of their contract. We do have a couple of those providers that have indicated they may have funding that they will not be able to expend in the neighborhood of $1-2 million per a couple providers. And those are the folks, I think those are the resources where we would look at reinvesting into the other providers who have identified the ability to take on more resources. And we will continue to monitor these at-risk providers on a monthly basis. Every month, about mid-month, we get the actual numbers in, both on the number of units they've produced and their expenditures, and we'll continue that monitoring on an ongoing basis. And I think there's not necessarily a drop-dead date as there is month to month, looking at the situation of each one of these providers, where they're at in the process, and continuing to talk to them and identify resources that they may not be able to expend.
When you heard on the first panel, the Energy Commission, through the programs and contracts that it's overseeing, has now this sort of escape hatch of if it comes down to it towards the end of the time frame before the deadline, they are now authorized to shift money over to that DGS program to avoid it reverting back to Washington. Do you have any such escape hatch? And if so, what is it? If not, should that be something that we consider?
I think our escape hatch, I would respond to a question you had earlier. Our escape hatch had been the request to the Department of Energy to get a one-year extension on our ARRA dollars. For the reasons I mentioned about the late federal startup with guidance, we were arguing to the federal partners that we would like a similar extension for the ARRA grants here in California. And although we do not have an official response yet, DOE has been, at the staff level supportive of the request, but we do not have an official response, and we're not banking on an extension. We would be happy to look at the framework in which the DGS CEC arrangement has emerged as an escape hatch for them. I think there is difference in the funding that we get. We don't necessarily make loans, but I think it is something that we need to explore with our federal partners to see, is that an opportunity for our grant awarded to CSD? Should we not be able to expend each and every dollar? And we'd be happy to check that out.
Okay, so I'll remind you, as I reminded the previous panel, when we reconvene in January, we'll have a little bit less time for you, as a matter of fact, for any legislative action necessary to create an opening or some breathing room for you. And just out of curiosity, I want to come back and talk a little bit about coordination and collaboration with other departments and agencies on the weatherization piece. You heard me bring that up with the first panel, but has there been a survey of other states that may be in similar situations in doing the work that you do and what they've done to avoid their funds reverting back to the federal government that we can learn from? Any other creative approaches?
Our surveys of other states have really brought to light the benefits of the multifamily weatherization aspect of the program. As Director Wagner had offered in his testimony, it was our original DOE program was very much a single-family centric program, and with the emergence of the DOE ARRA funding, we had to evolve the program to allow for this whole building weatherization approach, which a number of our at-risk providers are looking at as an opportunity to accomplish their goals, as well as to ensure the full expenditure of their DOE ARRA contract funds.
Okay, and along with the moving the money along on a better basis, do we have updated numbers on job created stats? Is that part of the dashboard?
We haven't included in the dashboard, but we are required. Part of our federal reporting requirements include reporting on jobs, and the definition that we're required to use is that for every 520 hours in each quarter, the federal government translates that into what they call a full-time equivalent, or FTE. So every quarter, we need to take the hours of work as funded by our program and report it based on FTEs. When we first started reporting, we were averaging about 80, 90 per quarter of FTEs. The latest quarter is about 538, and we've been averaging anywhere from 450 FTEs to just over 500 FTEs each quarter for the last year and a quarter.
Okay, and so that's jobs created in this interim period with a lot of the weatherization work being done. Is there any projection or forecast of how many permanent jobs post-ARRA funds may result from this activity?
We haven't done any projections to that degree. We do anticipate that with the ending of ARRA, that a lot of these jobs will go with it, unfortunately. I know a number of our providers have expressed that same concern to us, which they term the cliff effect. And as Director Wagner had offered in his testimony, that was one of the areas that we were trying to mitigate against, with the weatherization strike force concept, was to ensure that we didn't lose any productive capacity within the network.
I think a lot of what I heard from our colleagues in Congress, and a lot of what I've heard here in previous hearings is, through the course of this work and ramping up how much of the work is done on a monthly and annual basis in this interim period where the ARRA funds are in play, we're instilling in Californians a expertise, a skill set that can then be translated post-ARRA funds into this clean energy economy that we're all trying to build. And I just can't help but recognize that this public goods charge conversation and other bigger energy efficiency programs overseen by the Public Utilities Commission is in a little bit of flux in terms of to what extent California ratepayers are going to be investing in it and what sort of capacity that creates. Is there any dialogue happening or transition that we can plan for workers that were trained and more than got their feet wet under ARRA efforts can then be sort of directed to contractors or programs at the PUC?
Well, in one of my other roles is I serve as the vice chair to the Low Income Oversight Board, and that's an advisory body to the California Public Utility Commission on low-income energy and water issues. And that is one of the areas that the board has focused extensively over the past several years. Unfortunately, there's a couple things that make that a bit challenging. For one, on the CSD side, our grants are going to revert back to normal funding levels. So, where we're focused on ARRA, where it's a $186 million grant, in our current grant year, our current grant funding for the 2011 period is almost a little bit more than $4 million. And so you can see that's a huge workforce that we're trying to that we're concerned with in terms of how the state can benefit from that workforce. Unfortunately, on the CPUC side, in order to absorb that workforce, there would have to be some significant change in terms of funding and goals and whatnot to allow that workforce to transition to the CPUC and offer any benefit. Because similar to the CPUC and the CSD programs under ARRA, the CPUC really increased their low-income energy efficiency program efforts and increased funding to achieve their strategic goal of weatherizing all low-income California households, I think, by 2020. And so there was already an uptake in hiring and infrastructure building that took place, which may have been a missed opportunity for us if that was delayed, because we could allow our workforce to transition. And so that's been the extent of the conversation so far. We continue to look at it, but it does face its fair share of challenges.
Okay. Any other observations or lessons learned or success stories from a communication coordination perspective, whether it's been with the PUC or the Energy Commission or entities like SMUD, where we got into the conversation of wanting to make sure we weren't duplicating efforts?
I'll ask Jason to add his thoughts as well, but I think ARRA gave us an opportunity, given the funding size. If you look at what historically we had been running, an opportunity to think about ways in which to do things differently, whether you look at MUD strategies. We've also had discussions with the PUC directly. I've met with Commissioner Simon, and one of the things we're looking at as the PUC goes forward, how do our eligibility requirements, whether it be income or assets, necessarily mesh with those of the PUC for low-income programs? And how do we better coordinate that? Because when ARRA does go away, it'll be more important than ever to leverage the resources that remain and come into our various funding streams. And so I think it gave us an opportunity to focus on ARRA, but then ask the question, how do we leverage even better, even more our resources going forward? And those conversations have started because of that.
And just to add to that, on the multifamily utility aspect of our program, it has evolved, and I think there are some valued lessons that have been learned over the last 6 months for CSD as a state and as a state as a whole. The CEC, even though we haven't had any direct conversations at the department level, what we're seeing at the more local level is that there are challenges that prevent the type of leveraging that we would like to see between the CSD programs and the CSC programs. And one of those barriers is the energy audit standards, where the DOE has one energy audit standard and the state has a different energy audit standards. And in order for these projects to receive the benefit of the dual funds or the dual funding, requires 2 energy audits to be performed on the project. So what we're looking at doing is conducting some studies and really trying to look at a way that we can make a sound argument to DOE to maybe adopt a single standard for California, which will offer benefit more long term, but unfortunately won't be a benefit for the DOE ARRA funding. And also with our whole building approach, it is serving as a model that California is being very much recognized for, nationally, and also within the state. There are concerns that or questions how we could sustain that whole building approach once the DOE ARRA program comes to a sunset. So there has been a number of discussions with the CPUC and other stakeholder groups to figure out how we can sustain that whole, that type of comprehensive approach to weatherizing multifamily properties within the state. So I guess that's another lesson learned in looking at potential opportunities going forward.
Great. Thank you. And I know among the list of providers that are facing most serious challenges, 3 of them are the LA Department of Water and Power, the Community Resource Project of Sacramento, and the Community Action Partnership of San Bernardino. So I won't ask you detailed questions about them. We've actually invited them to speak today under public comment. So we'll see if I know a couple of them are represented. We'll hear what they have to say. But I wanted to, as I did with the first panel, also acknowledge your work in moving the needle here on the dashboard. We've come a long way. We still have some work cut out for us, but we're making better progress, and we'll keep this conversation going.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you both very much. That concludes our 2 scheduled and agendized panels for today. We now turn to public comment for today's hearing and invite anybody who wishes to present to committee to come forward.
Morning, Chair, members. My name is Jose Hernandez. I'm here representing the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. We're really here to commend CSD in terms of reaching out to some of the local entities and working with us to meet the intent of the ARRA grant. As you know, DWP is committed to developing sustainable long-term energy efficiency programs that not only will reduce customer bills, but also contribute to the reduction in greenhouse emissions. We really appreciate the working relationship that we have established with Director John Wagner, Mr. Wimbley, and the staff. Again, with the whole effort of being able to meet the intended goals of providing affordable weatherization services to much-needed customers. DWP became involved in this process to fill a void, that there was an opportunity in Los Angeles that DWP felt needed to be met. And since then, working with the mayor's office and CSD, they have been working to ensure that all the residents receive the benefits of the ARRA energy efficiency dollars. weatherization programs at DWP are fairly new, and that's why I really appreciate the fact that CSD has taken the time to work through some of the lessons learned. For example, there have been numerous enhancements on the multifamily dwelling. Right now, DWP is committed on an 80-20 plan where 80% of the families moving forward will be multifamily units, 20% self. In addition, LADWP has increased the size of their intake team, and this has translated directly into additional homes that are participating in the program. In the last 2 weeks, 800 new participants in the program. Lots of changes in outreach in terms of direct mailing, lots of changes in terms of canvassing the whole neighborhoods. This has all allowed DWP to better meet the intended goals. You mentioned jobs. DWP has also been able to produce real jobs, net jobs. In working with the mayor and LA Trade Tech, created a weatherization training service that's going to be long-standing. So the opportunity for future individuals to participate from that. In addition, creating a brand new city hiring classification where the essence was to create a pipeline for individuals moving forward. So transferable skills. So you're right that ARRA money might go away. However, these are transferable skills, and these now city employees can look for other similar types of jobs. In summary, DLP wants to express its appreciation, helpful assistance, guidance, and recommendations provided by CSD toward achieving the targeted goals. And moreover, DWP and the mayor are committed to do three things. One, create sustainable new jobs. Two, ensure low-income families have access to affordable, quality weatherization programs. And three, ensure DLP meets all the goals of the ARRA grant. Thank you.
Okay. If you don't mind, let me ask you a couple of just quick data points. Do you have a percentage number off the top of your head of the dollars that were committed to LADWP for the various weatherization efforts? How much has been spent? How much?
I believe it's in the data sheet. I don't have it in front of me, and then I'm sure we can get it for you.
Okay. We have, as of the last report, 41% expended, 59% unexpended. So that puts you in the category of the red flags.
Yes.
What's the game plan for getting that down to a minimal number, if not zero, between now and the deadline in a few months?
So that's a little bit of what I alluded to in the sense that CSD has taken the time to really sit down with DWP and go over kind of the projections. Lots of recommendations. The three major recommendations, one is increase the intake team. There were a lot of disparities in the way that some of that was being done. So just by increasing the intake team, 800 new folks in the queue in the last 2 weeks. The other was the mailers, the way that the mailers were being done. And then lastly, I believe it was, I thought I mentioned it. Yep. It was
no, you did.
That canvassing, exactly. And so just by...
I guess the question or the concern from the state's perspective would be, so fine, the recommendation is you got to increase your capacity, because by increasing your capacity, you can increase the amount of work done on a monthly basis.
Exactly.
But it's very ambitious, very aggressive, increasing capacity, personnel and otherwise. Hopeful, but we want to make sure we're being realistic, because I'd hate for the funding to leave the state of California. Exactly. Personally, I'd hate the funding to have to be reallocated from LA to another part of the state.
Exactly.
So how are we doing?
So I know you mentioned Plan B, Plan C with other folks. I do know that DWP is in discussions with CSD about utilizing other providers in the existing area to maybe supplement some of the work, and that's an ongoing discussion. Right now, the main plan is to increase the pipeline.
Okay. And these spreadsheets give us the dollars spent, dollars not spent numbers. They don't give us the jobs numbers.
Exactly.
Do you have any of the jobs data?
We can get
share?
that for you, definitely. Anecdotally, I know that Lane has been keeping track of that. I mean, they have all these stories, they have videos and things like that.
Well,
so there's definitely information
appreciate
on the
numbers
jobs. Okay.
At your convenience. And then another specific question, since you mentioned the weatherization certification program at Trade Tech.
Yes.
So post ARRA funding, what's the plan or the thought on how to maintain that program?
So my understanding is there was some leveraging that happened. So it is a permanent program at LA Trade Tech. And then I'd like to get more information on that as well. So I'll get that for you too.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Next witness.
Good morning, Chairman Padilla. My name is Joan Graham. I'm representing Community Resource Project here in Sacramento. Community Resource Project has been doing these weatherization services in Northern California for over 30 years, and we have always spent out our contracts without any problems. So when I saw our name where it is on the high-risk list, it was a bit of a surprise until I realized what the reason for that was. So, and I'd like to give you some of the bumps and struggles that we've come up against in terms of meeting these goals and the challenges. But first, let me assure you, we will be spending all of the money. From the beginning of the ARRA contract, CSD encouraged us to do multifamily projects, and so we were in contact with Sacramento Housing and Redevelopment Agency and other agencies in other counties that we serve to identify some. And we started out with, we did a 50-unit complex in June of 2010. It was all seniors up in Sutter County, and we did a 100-unit complex in San Mateo County in October of last year. Those went without any hitch. They went very smoothly. Then on May 1st, we were scheduled to begin the complex known as Alder Grove here in Sacramento. Used to be New Helvetia, if you're Sacramento natives. It's 356 units, so it was a little bit larger than the majority of complexes we've done before. But also in between the previous ones and this one, there were some changes in the rules and that came down from the federal DOE. One of those was that the energy audits that we perform on units, and prior to last winter, the energy audits were done on a significant sampling of units within a complex, and under the new rules it was on 100%. So we started on May 1st doing 356 energy audits. At the same time, we have always had the SHPOs, the housing preservation rules, and we've always paid attention to them, but most of the time they were identified as parts of cities that came under that classification. And when we did the assessments on those, if we knew they were in a historic district, we knew that we couldn't do windows. We did not know that New Helvetia was going to be historic. And that came as quite a surprise, as we had very few apartment complexes in California that have ever been considered historic. At the same time we started the energy audits, we also submitted the SHPO application. Again, a change in that was there was no way to submit one application for the project. We had to submit 356 applications for housing preservation. Obviously, this was a burden paper-wise for everybody, as was the the energy audit, because prior to that, neither of those had to have 100% submission. So at any rate, lo and behold, Alder Grove was declared historic. And what that meant is we had to get a person who could come out and determine what the historic value was and what we needed to do. This took a while also, and in July they came out and made a determination. we received the determination on the 30th of August. Prior to that, we did receive an unofficial one that required that all of the windows that we were going to replace, because the audit had called for them, had to be done by color. And so we had to go rebid the construction for the windows and redo all of the energy audits because the construction cost was now higher. So as you can see, this was just one after the other. Now, CSD took all of these lessons and has now streamlined both the SHPO to be something we can do by complex, and the energy audits can now be done by complex. But at the time, that's what we get for being early off the block. So the project started
But you feel like you're back on track. That's the bottom line.
Project started on September 16th. It was supposed to start July 1. We are behind by that. But in addition to that, learning what we learned, we have already submitted in July for all the other historic preservation. We got determinations on October 25th, and we are moving forward. We have over 1,000 units in the pipeline. We have enough money to do about half of those. So we're not real worried about them. If some fall out, it actually would be helpful. Either that, or if we get an extension, we've got plenty of units in queue.
Okay. And you wouldn't happen to have jobs numbers with you?
I do. I heard your questions. We hired additional staff, crew members, and our staff has increased on a permanent level about 30 people full-time. In addition to that, we have, because of the expansion, we've also hired a lot of subcontractors, which I usually equate to about 6 FTEs on a quarterly basis. And obviously, some of those 30 jobs are going to fall out, although we are in the process of trying to expand our services to other energy efficiency services beyond ARRA.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Hang in there. We're not only watching, but obviously working with both of you to make sure that we maximize our achievement here between now and the deadline. So keep up the good work. Other witnesses enter public comment. I understand there's a request on behalf of the City of Oakland to read a letter into the record. If not, I'll just acknowledge that we've received a letter from the City of Oakland on behalf of their weatherization program, Michelle Bird, their Deputy Director, with their explanation on what they're doing to do better and get back on track as well. Mr. Oglesby, do you have an answer to my question?
I'm happy to report that the pay issue that you raised earlier during my testimony has been resolved, and I was even more happy to learn that the reason it came to light was part of the routine screening and project management that the Energy Commission does to look for these sort of things. So
that's great.
It's taken care of.
Thank you very much. Any other members of the public wishing to address this committee? Seeing none, happy Halloween. As I adjourn this hearing, we will put out a marker here that the auditor will be releasing a follow-up report on each agency in either December or January. We don't have an exact date yet, so pending the substance of their report and any recommendations, we may very well have another one of these conversations. So thank you all. Keep up the great work, and we'll see you soon.